This video was sponsored by War Thunder. Halo is brilliant, and I'm here to tell you why. Which one? Well, all of them. At least the Bungie ones. I'll answer the question straight away. It's because of the enemies. Not just because of the enemies, but that's a big part of what makes this whole series so replayable and addictive. And it's what I'm focusing on here. But that just raises a new question that we have to answer. Why were the enemies so good? Well, because they were fun to fight, because they were diverse and full of character and personality, because they told a story. You see, we look at game AI as a technical obstacle, but building it is about far more than simply skill or tech. It's an art. And designing enemies and the way you encounter them is an art in and of itself, a vehicle to express stories. The tech is merely a challenge in the way of this art. Enemy design is storytelling. It's world building. Now you may have noticed I used AI and enemy design kind of interchangeably, so let's define our terms quickly. AI means artificial intelligence. When we hear artificial we might think fake, but really it means created, the product of human artifice, an intelligence that humans built. And what is intelligence? Well, it's us, it's humans, specifically how we think, logic and pattern recognition. So an intelligence is an entity which is capable of thinking. It behaves in a way which is similar to human thought, or rather it appears to think like a human. That's why machine learning, LLMs and game AI, although they're actually different technologies, they're all placed under the same umbrella of AI, because they appear to mimic some of the intelligence that one would anticipate from a human. Making AI in games is notoriously hard.
That's really hard. That's the Lionhead, guys. It's really hard.
That's widely known. It's hard because technically there are somewhat complex systems at work. It's hard because these systems have to interact with one another. The AI has to contend with the physics engine, with player input, with scripted events. It's also hard because it's multidisciplinary. You have to have good engineering, good artists and animators, good designers, even sound design is heavily involved. There's so much work that goes into making convincing AI, and that's what intelligent AI really is. It's convincing AI. And that brings us to my sponsor, War Thunder. It's the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, and it's available now for free on PC, consoles, and mobile devices. I'm actually excited for this sponsorship because War Thunder is actually good. It's basically a semi-simulation. It's deep, but with the boring bits cut out. It has a considerable amount of content, 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships from 10 major nations, ranging from biplanes and armored cars used in the 1920s to the fighter jets and main battle tanks used in the 2020s. It has this cool damage model where you can target and disable specific parts of the vehicle. War Thunder is very immersive. It's detailed in terms of the vehicles, the graphics, and the authentic sound effects. And for a multiplayer game this big, it runs honestly quite well. It's got a global community of over 95 million players in PvP battles today. Jump into War Thunder. With its unmatched quantity of high quality content, it is the game for fans of military history. The link to download for free is available in the description and the pinned comment. It's available on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile. There's a bonus pack available for new and returning players that haven't played for at least 6 months for PC and console. If you use my link down below, it's got multiple premium vehicles and an exclusive vehicle decorator. It's available for a limited time. Now, why am I arguing that Halo did AI well? Well, because they did, obviously. Just play the game. But how? How did they do it? How did they build it? I said before that AI is intelligence based on humans, but Halo enemies obviously aren't human. Well, they kind of are. Each of the features of the different enemy races was based upon something we've seen. As Hume said, there are ideas and impressions. A complex idea, like an elite, is based on a wide range of impressions, i.e. things we witness in our senses. Visually, they're sharks, bugs, dogs, and people all in one. Personality-wise, they're the elites, the upper class. When you put it that way, they seem a lot more familiar and easy to comprehend. They are the upper echelon, so they have more health, they have higher shields, they have better guns, they lead the rest of the troops. They are a martial race, they carry swords, they even look a little like samurai. The grunts are also very on the nose. They're, well, the grunts, the cannon fodder. They don't want to be here. They're slaves, they're conscripts, they're cowardly and disposable. The jackals, they're scavengers, they're opportunists, who are self-interested, hence the shield. They will also run away for self-preservation's sake, but if they feel emboldened, they can be a major threat. Hunters are meant to be the deadly killing machines. These enemies are consistent. Their names are very on the nose. They behave how we'd expect these character archetypes to behave, and they fill in all these classic character archetypes. And here's the cool part, you can get all this lore and story information without even watching the cutscenes. Just from playing the game, it's all communicated. You want there to be very obvious stereotypes because it's much harder to communicate nuance in the heat of a battle in a game. Actman, what do you think made Halo do so well in terms of the combat?
What makes Halo's AI unique is a couple of things. Number one, it's visual clarity. There's something so fun about killing an elite and then watching a bunch of grunts run away flailing their arms, right? You don't even have to put an image of that on screen. If you played Halo, you know exactly what that looks like. In fact, it was so good in the first game that same little like, wah! They've used that same animation essentially in every game after that. So that's just like one example. But also, apart from just being entertaining, funny, and goofy, like it added a bit of strategy. Like sure, you could kill the grunts first because they're weaker, but if you took the time to take out the elite, it would make the grunts easier to pick off. So it also added some amount of strategy. I think especially the elites in the first game were the most fun to fight, like on Legendary. In some ways, they really did perfect a lot of things in the first game.
Now, what actually are the challenges in bringing all of these to life? Well, a lot of other games like Medal of Honor and Half-Life created their scenarios by utilizing a lot of scripting. This can make enemies feel clever, but it also feels like a movie. Eventually the illusion will break and you realize they're just doing what the designer told them to. Games also achieved intelligent behavior through code, state machines, etc. They tell the AI what to do depending on many factors in the world state. Half-Life utilized these. In Halo, of course, they had to think about how they split these duties between code, that's pre-programmed behavior like state machines, and scripting, which is what the designers do. So the distinction is programmers and designers, and here's how they did it. The designers worked on a 3-minute timescale. What happens every 3 minutes? Well, that's typically how long encounters are meant to go for, so things like spawning in dropships, broader mission objectives like defend or attack this point, go here. Conversely to the designers, the programmers operate on a 30-second time scale. This included racial characteristics like the elites leading and grunts following. This is the 30 seconds of fun that you've always heard about. This is more like split-second decisions, like whether to run away, to dodge a grenade on the floor, or to throw a grenade, whether or not this pillar makes a good piece of cover. That's where this 30 seconds of fun comes from. That was mostly the engineers who built that, who have to get that solid 30-second loop of gameplay working. That's the make or break formula. It's the level designers then who are working on that 3-minute time scale, thinking in terms of encounters, who create the variations on that 30-second formula. They stop it from getting stale. They introduce new variables and new environments to keep it fresh. Now, when they were designing the AI in Halo 1, they had to be intelligible, interactive, and unpredictable. What does that mean? Intelligible means the player can figure them out. The Halo AI follow the rules. They're predictable. They communicate pretty clearly what they are and what they are doing. The elites actually followed the same rules as the player. Their shields work the same, like they had to take cover and recharge them. The combat moves at the player's speed. If the player is holding back, the enemies will as well, because they want to hold a position. They're not just trying to kill the player. The more the player pushes, the more resistance the enemies offer. Interactive means they can blow smoke up the player's ass and tell the player how awesome they are. Even the clever elites can be fooled with a backsmack. They have limited knowledge. They can only see things in their field of view. The enemies will react with shock, awe, and surprise at the player brilliantly outwitting them. Elites go berserk. Grunts run away. It actually has some mechanics that you see in stealth games. For example, if you shoot somewhere, the enemy will investigate it.
A lot of the fun memories I have also is just like when you're sneaking through and you're going through some area where there's a bunch of sleeping grunts. Or even in Halo 2 where you got the active camo and you're trying to take out as many as you can before they spot you. So it was also capable of like stealth sections, even though, you know, you didn't have silencers or nothing like that.
And they also need to be unpredictable to create a unique experience. You don't want them to do the exact same scripted behavior every time. Doesn't this kind of contradict the predictability principle though? You can't make their behavior random. What is unpredictable, however, is the player's action. They make the enemy unpredictable by leaning more on the programmed behavior. How far away is the player from the NPC? Do they have line of sight? How much health do they have? All of these subtle differences in the code will have a significant effect on what the AI does, and it will contribute to making it unpredictable, or rather, novel. So it feels like brand new every time you play it. They called this cascading. One thing leads to another. This is how they kept the AI feeling fresh.
In terms of kind of like dynamic engagements, Halo was always cream of the crop. So another thing, you'd throw a grenade on an elite or any enemy or an ally and stick them, they would react to it. The funny thing about the Flood is they would not react at all. They just did not give a fuck.
Now that's the general design philosophy. How did they actually build it? The fundamental data block of the Halo engine was called a tag. Each tag type had a bunch of different data blocks contained within. What is a data block? Anything you want. What is a tag? Anything you want. Let's be more specific about how it's structured. The NPCs are known as actors, so there is an actor tag. The information within those are stored in different data blocks, like health information, animation information, for example. So that's what I mean. What other tags are there? There are bipeds, which refer to the character, which contain also a reference to the 3D model, animation, and collision tag. It should be pretty obvious what those mean. The player also has a biped tag. The Flood has a biped tag. Each character has a number of tags that hold the specific piece, or rather a specific collection of data. The actor tag specifically refers to AI characters, and that's the one that contains all of their behavior. It's important to understand what behavior is. It's basically a command that a certain action must be performed within a certain time frame, like throwing a grenade or getting behind cover. As you can see, there are a lot of predefined behaviors hard-coded in by the programmers. The designers simply edit these. For example, dumb characters like the grunt can be made to dive off ledges. You also tweak how fast it moves, how perceptive it is, and how quickly it panics. Perception is quite easy. You just define a front side of the biped and it performs a ray cast to the player position depending on the defined parameters. When the ray is cast, the AI determines whether the player falls within the actor's cone of vision. The actor_variant is the actual object that gets instantiated in the game world. It's obviously the specific variant of the character, like the Spec Ops grunt, for example. This links the actor tag and the biped tag. Quick question, why do they use this tag system? Because it allows them to quickly iterate. The objects reference each other with a string containing the location of the other tag in a directory. This means you can just swap out tags with each other instantly without having to compile or reload anything. Developing is quick. It does mean there are fairly long loading times when you first open the map in the editor though. It also provides a very simple interface to the designers to change parameters without touching any code. This is great for a mission-based shooter with a predefined set of items on the map that have to be loaded, like battle rifle, assault rifle, grunt. The Halo engine really was specifically the Halo engine, like it is an engine specifically designed for building Halo games. You really wouldn't want to build an RPG with hundreds of different items on this game engine. Man, imagine the technical limitations you'd run into then. It's a good thing nobody tried to do that, right? The AI aren't a hive mind either. Each AI handles its own state, its own relation to the player character and world items like grenades. If one enemy knows where you are, doesn't mean everybody else does. Basically, the AI doesn't cheat. It has no access to the world state. All the information it has access to is obtained from its own personal knowledge model, almost all. Things like scenery and doors are the exception. One challenge with this is that it limits how much you can have going on at once, especially for a game on the original Xbox. This is one of the big challenges that Halo consistently ran into. Because obviously it's meant to be this big epic action game with a ton going on. Whenever you add a new actor, not only does it need to store its own understanding of the world state, it also needs to be accounted for by all the other actors. How did they manage this? Well, for one, none of the battles were as real as they seemed. You ever realize how all of the action was always in front of you? And rarely did you turn back? Well, that's because of clever garbage collection. That is, removing objects and actors from the level which are no longer needed. At least in this context, that's what that means. This was the responsibility of the level designer. The AI also doesn't have hidden states. If the AI is doing something in code, it is usually accompanied by some kind of animation or a voice line, like the screaming elite, the shouting marine. These are often called barks and are certainly not unique to Halo, but Halo was especially good at communicating them. They were very exaggerated.
Oh man, I just had this thing wrong!
Now, in each level there are encounters. This is like a whole battle. Think the beach landing in The Silent Cartographer. There are squads within these encounters. How does the AI move about the world? There are firing points, which the designer must painstakingly place everywhere in the world. There is a nav mesh, which is created by scanning all the walkable surfaces. This tells every actor which surfaces are walkable. Duh. Then they use the A-star algorithm to determine the shortest path along the walkable surface to get to the firing point. These firing points are assigned to squads and are placed on walkable surfaces. And that's how the actors navigate the world. How did the actors choose which firing points to go to? Well, that brings us back to the 30 seconds of fun, because the actors work on a programmed 30-second timescale. And this is how they choose which point to go to. Do they need to hide and recharge their health? Or then they go to one that's marked as cover and doesn't have line of sight with the player, preferably with some object in the way of where they last knew the player was at. So how do they make the decisions on where to go? What is the actual data structure used to build these AIs and their decision-making capabilities? A finite state machine. What is it though? Well, it's a machine, and it has a finite number of states that it can be, and it can only be one of these states at a time. These states are called behaviors, like I've said earlier. So they are things like search, fight, flee. But how does the machine decide how to transition from one state to another? Well, that relies on the decision logic that the designers and programs decide to implement. This decision logic is represented by events, which basically describe the conditions to make the machine transition from one state to another. The AI uses information obtained by the personal knowledge model that I've previously described to change to different states. There is a default cycle for all AI that determines transitions between states, but then each race has a different list of behaviors available to it, which the state machine may choose from, like how grunts flee. But then if the situation model / personal knowledge model knows that the elite is alive, then the fleeing behavior is disabled. This data is then fed to the motion control model. This is what tells the AI which firing points it should go to and when. It examines all the firing points and decides which one to go to. For example, if you want the AI to take cover and restore health, you want the AI to go to a firing point which it believes isn't within the player's line of sight. The AI behavior was perhaps a bit more pre-planned and less spontaneous than it seemed. That was the job of the designers. There was something called platoons, which squads can be added to. This determines whether their current mode is attacking or defending, and it affects where on the map the squad will be. This is an early example of features which were added to grant the level designers greater control over the whole battle. Their broader organizational goals, like attacking, retreating, defending, over the course of the encounter were prescribed by the designer, and this would remain so for all of the Halo games.
Halo actually made it hard for me to enjoy other first-person shooter games, because I would always compare it to Halo and be like, well, I'm just kind of shooting guys that are just standing there, you know? Like, they're just kind of standing there.
Now, how would the designers control this? Scripting. Halo had its own scripting language, HSC, or Halo script. It's a fairly simple Lisp-based language with a bunch of predefined functions like AI migrate. It's mostly about saying go here at this time. Usually it knows what to do due to things like trigger volumes. That is, when the player goes within this zone, do this. There are also conditions, like if the squad actor count is below a certain level or something. Fall back. Halo is deliberately very cause and effect based. Here is an example of the Halo script playing out. See how it slowly advances to new functions as the players move forward? Most commands are AI migrate or vehicle load, things like that. It really is like a script for a stage show. Despite this, Halo Combat Evolved AI are still fairly intelligent even when unscripted. They just have no broader strategic goals, which makes sense because it's a story game. It's not an RTS with a skirmish mode where there has to be a pre-planned, generic strategic goal for the whole game. Now obviously a lot of tweaking went into this. They really had to exaggerate a lot of the enemy features. Apparently players couldn't pick up that the grunts were running away when you kill the leader, so they made it always happen, and then made the run super exaggerated, and then they added a leader dead voice line. The important lesson from Halo is that subtlety doesn't work with AI. If you think you're being clever, you're not. You need to communicate things as straightforwardly as possible. So Halo Combat Evolved was simple but effective. I think some of the best moments with the Halo Combat Evolved AI are when they try to catch you napping. This was mostly done with scripts. Or when an elite hides from you and flanks you when you pass its cover. This is built-in behavior. Another good AI moment is when you see the different enemy factions fight each other. This demonstrates the internal knowledge model. They fight their enemies the same way they fight you. And they don't fight you until you get close to them. There really was a whole team at Bungie behind this. I got a lot of this information from GDC talks given by Jamie Griesemer, who was a lead designer at Bungie who helped put the AI systems together, and Chris Butcher, who was the programmer and fish and chips enjoyer and child prodigy that built a lot of it, aka did the actual work.
How can anything be bigger than Halo? We'll find out.
2 Halos. That's right. Now we're in Halo 2. And how did it change? Well, quite a lot actually, you'd be surprised. Halo 2 actually pioneered a lot of new techniques for how AI works in games. One of the most important innovations being the behavior tree. You see, in Halo 2 they needed a new tech to make the designer's job easier. They also wanted to permit a greater number of potential gameplay scenarios. Reminder, when each AI has its own state machine, it has a limited number of available behaviors because you have to manually decide the link between each behavior. But what if you want to scale that up? Halo 2 is meant to be bigger, better, and more badass than the last one. You want a system that allows for a bunch of different scenarios and specific AI behaviors for those scenarios. You want it to be easier for designers to tailor for specific scenarios. There are way more options now, like enemies can hijack you. We got flying enemies. These robots can pick up your vehicle. Plus, we want bigger battles, more enemy NPCs on screen. Each actor having its own state machine limits the amount you can show on screen. You have limitations for the sake of performance. How do we create some more hive mind behavior? How do we use our resources more efficiently? Turn off behaviors that we don't currently need. In Halo 2, there were like 130 possible behaviors, with each individual AI having access to around 60 of those. Well, we have all these behaviors, how about we make a new structure for them? Instead of a bunch of states with defined transitions between each, how about a hierarchical structure? A tree! This is what a behavior tree is. These are trees which can, of course, be non-binary. There are nodes, and then any number of subnodes can be assigned to each node. Each node, or leaf, in the tree is a behavior. This technology was, to my knowledge, popularized in games broadly with Halo 2. It's often attributed with that. Obviously they existed before this, but not for long. They were first described in only 2001 in academic papers. It is now standard in game engines like Unreal. To be fair, Damien Isler was the AI programmer for Halo 2 onward, and he said everyone was using some form of hierarchical decision structure at the time. So yeah. The behavior tree basically works like this. The root node contains a few subnodes. These are things like idle, engage, retreat, ambush. When you go down to one node, you're going to a branch of the tree. So you don't have to think about all the other branches of the tree, just ones in this immediate area. You only have to choose from the children. If your enemies are ambushing, we'll say they're ambushing, and then you only need to select some behavior from this ambushing tree. What determines the node it selects? Well, like in Halo 1, factors like whether or not they're in combat, where the player and marines are, their health, the scripting. But aside from all those factors, how does it select the best node for any given time? Well, a number of methods. One is a prioritized list. Given certain conditions, make X choice. If one condition is true but another is false, choose Y. See, Halo 2 used binary decision making. It didn't weigh each node and then choose it based on likelihood. It's either a yes or a no, because they wanted the prioritized lists to be predictable. They didn't want it to be non-deterministic. For example, if the player is close to an enemy, melee.
There you are.
If the enemy is down to a certain number of allies, it will flee, or go berserk, depending on what has been enabled or disabled in the style tag. There is also a predefined sequence. It can loop through them top to bottom as well. This, for example, is what the search part of the tree does. And it can also randomly select which behavior it wants, failing that or depending on context. So for example, the after combat part of the tree will go through a randomized list of behaviors, like maybe it'll shoot a corpse, or maybe it'll taunt.
I love close combat.
One important thing to note about Halo 2 is that it was rushed, and this did affect the system. For example, the behavior tree is full of these things called impulses, basically like go-to statements. They're hacky, and instead of formally following the structure of the behavior tree to arrive at the desired result, just write a localized piece of code that jumps to wherever the desired state is. Which goes to show sometimes the most elegant solution isn't the best, especially when you're working on a project with time limits. Sometimes if a designer is designing a level and they want AI to do something specific and they just can't get it to work, you just need to force it to work. Especially if you're in the 9-month death march that was the development of Halo 2. You can still see some artifacts of this rushed development. Halo 2 AI was the most buggy. You could break it in quite a number of ways, especially the brutes. There are some character-specific behaviors, like grunts fleeing all the time, but you don't want elites to constantly check for that. It's a waste of resources. That is why there is a custom style tag for each character, where you can disable behaviors. And you can also add character-specific impulses. And you can make more rare impulses only appear in the behavior tree when a certain condition is met, like the previously mentioned fleeing grunts. Those don't need to be on all the time because you don't even need to check for that behavior until the leader is dead. One of the reasons AI is so challenging is because you need an animation for all of these. Bungie wanted the player to know the enemy's state, so the state has exaggerated animations. When you have a fuck ton of states, you need a fuck ton of animations. Did you know Marines can flip warthogs? That's right. There are joint behaviors as well. The AI can send requests to other AI within the vicinity under certain scenarios to perform the same behavior at the same time. When there are 3 or more Marines in the vicinity of a flipped over warthog, they'll just flip it back. After centuries of playing Halo 1, I never knew this was even a thing. And it's not scripted, it's a programmed behavior. Really, that fact just kind of encapsulates the whole video, really. There's so many of these cool little details. In Halo 2, designers had a bit more control. They had the tags, which controlled what behaviors each character had access to. They could tweak how they generally worked, systematically. And then for specific actions, that was done through scripting. So largely like Halo 1 with some more options in the tags and more functions available in scripting. The actor tag from Halo 1 evolved into the style tag. There was also another system called orders. This was an evolution of platoons from Halo Combat Evolved. Basically, you define a space that the AI should occupy under certain conditions. As the battle evolves, with things like reinforcements, chief moving forward through the battlefield, time passing, etc., the conditions change. A new order is then assigned to the squad. Occupy this area instead, and behave like this. Bunker down, pursue, etc. Basically, it's another tool for the designers to tell the AI to do a specific thing, outside of scripting. One issue, it didn't work. It was buggy and just very hard to get the enemies to actually do what you want to do when you want them to do it. This is what I've heard from basically every, community member who's tried using it. The lesson is that Halo 2 was overly ambitious, and it's a miracle that it managed to actually release and be pretty good. Some of the best AI moments are when you can completely break the brute AI by jumping on a plinth. Like, you might want to sit this one out. When you analyze it closer, Halo 2 has a disturbingly unprecedented ton of rough edges. It's actually quite shocking that the average player has a relatively smooth experience. I think that's a testament to their focus on playtest, iteration, design. At the end of the day, the systems, the gameplay, they exist to serve the whole experience. If you need to hack something to get the desired experience, well, then you need to. There are functions that exist for just one single bug in the game. One thing you learn from game designers is that iteration is everything, because everything starts out shit, and you mold it into something worthwhile. Halo 3 was notable for 2 things. It was more reform than revolution. That is, it was more iterative than completely shaking up the systems. It had a less rushed development with more time to build ideas. The second is that Halo 3 had to be big. It had to feel massive. A massive world with massive battles. This would have to mean more enemies and allies on screen, and bigger vehicles as well, with more things happening at once. It was in HD with a more powerful system and a larger budget. Larger battles require more hive mind behavior, but still made some fairly notable improvements. First, I want to mention a publication for Halo 3 by Damien Isler, where he looks back on the previous games and tells us exactly what made Halo work. One is the idea of territories, like a rugby match, the no man's land, defense and offense. You win as you push the enemy back. The level designers determine where forward and back are. This is the 30 seconds of fun. Then also the limited knowledge model was a plus. It made the player feel smart without making the AI feel dumb. They feel like real actors and it's fun to fool them. The designers would deliberately add AI blind spots to their levels to allow the player to outflank the baddies. And finally, satisfying enemies. They scream and shout. When you backpack a jetpack brute, it goes flying. They insult you on the battlefield, which makes them so fun to kill. Halo 3 continues the trend of providing more tools to the designers. Rather than relying purely on hard-coded behavior, the character and style tags are largely the same, with obviously some new options like pure forms and scarabs. One of the big ones was the evolution of the orders system. They took the established behavior tree and applied that to this idea of field orders. That is how we get the objectives system in Halo 3. Basically, a hierarchical system which tells squads where to go and under what conditions, and yes, I said squads. That is a group of enemies. They existed in the previous games, but they became more important in Halo 3. Now it is, like I said, more of a hive mind. Because now squads share knowledge. There is no individual knowledge model, just the squad knowledge model. And now the objective system gives them all similar orders as well. Basically, this made it easier in terms of design and memory limitations. It permitted larger battles. Not every NPC does its own thinking. With the objective system, squads kind of fall into buckets depending on circumstances. It is, well, frankly, a task tree rather than a behavior tree. Basically the same principle. The objective system consists of tasks, filters/conditions, and parameters. Each leaf of the tree is a task. Filters determine who can enter the task, brutes only or vehicle only, for example. Conditions determine the state under which that task can be entered. For example, the player has hit a trigger volume. And parameters determine kind of special behaviors associated with that task, like follow the player. Like I said before, the encounter is the basic unit of how Halo levels are designed, like the beach on the Silent Cartographer, or the beach on the Covenant. Each encounter has a zone. Each objective also has a zone. Encounters don't exist in engine, they're more of a theoretical thing that the designers use. So there's a kind of one-to-one-to-one relation between encounters, zones, and objectives. Almost. Typically, Halo 3 levels have, for example, the objectives for vehicles, for infantry enemies, and for player allies, which are separate, but there's still one of each of these for each zone. Within each zone, there are a bunch of areas. Think of them as a bunch of firing points grouped together in a certain, well, area. These also come to matter more with Halo 3 because each task is associated with an area. This is what I meant when I said the system tells squads where to go. You can kind of see how it's almost like scripting, just far more robust and much easier for designers. This reinforces the encounter type design of Halo that we keep going back to, and the encounter consists of that 30-second gameplay loop over and over that is contained within the character and style tag. This was decided by the programmers and AI designers, and then there are the long-term strategic goals for the whole encounter. They're decided by the level designers. Let's look at this system in action. Here on the Ark, on the opening encounter, see how the squads are automatically placed into these tasks. Here on the left tracks the number of squads assigned to each task. You can set a minimum, meaning this number of enemies must be met before other tasks get filled with enemies. You can set a maximum, like attacking. You don't want all the enemies to attack at once. Maybe maximum 2 brutes. See how, as I progress, these conditions are met and enemies get assigned to these new tasks. The battlefield is ever changing. Some of the best moments in Halo 3 include the Scarab battles, especially the 2 Scarabs moment, because this is where they really showed their dedication to scale. Halo 3 convinces you that you're in massive battles, when in reality they aren't that big. They used the flock system, where these Hornets and Banshees are basically as intelligent as a particle, but they made the battle feel bigger. But what was it like to actually build these levels for the designers? Well, here's one of the level designers for Halo 3, Niles Sankey, who designed the mission, The Covenant.
This is Niles Sankey. I was a mission designer on Halo 3 and the lead mission designer on Halo Reach. And then I went on to do some design work on Destiny as well. And now I'm an independent indie game designer working on a solo project called The Razor Form. core function of the AI is just very solid. I think, as you've pointed out, the design team, the engineering team, and the animation team did a great job of telegraphing the AI behavior into the animations, and that goes a long way to make the AI appear intelligent. They built over the course of, between Halo 1 and Halo 3, and I started work at Bungie on Halo 3, but they did such a great job of building the mission design tools to where we could very, very quickly create encounters, and we could iterate very fast. We could iterate very quickly to polish these encounters, get the AI moving the way we really wanted. And a lot of that was done through the encounter tools, which were just really brilliantly designed by both the engineering and design team. One of the first days that I started at Bungie, and it was the first day that I opened up the editor. The first thing I did was I placed a squad of Marines and I placed a squad of Covenant, and then hit the play button in the editor, and immediately these two squads came to life and just started shooting each other, and immediately it looked like a little, yeah, it was amazing. You could build encounters very fast, but in order to really sort of polish the encounters, you needed to, give it time. A lot of usability testing was a huge thing at Bungie. So depending on how much usability testing, like player testing, that we did before we released, depending on how much testing was done, really kind of had a huge impact on the quality of the encounter. So you're talking like hundreds probably of iterations on each encounter. I went to Monolith to work on Condemned. I didn't really realize it sort of at the time, but in retrospect, I got to use two of the best AI systems in the industry, and they're very different systems, but I'm so glad I got that experience. It was quite interesting when we would build encounters for, say, Fear or Condemned at Monolith. You did a lot of very, I guess I would describe it as micro encounter design. You still had this concept of firing points in both systems, but on Condemned, the firing points were your primary sort of input as to how you build an encounter. Depending on where you put the firing points, some of them had a visibility cone, and what that did was, as you moved around the environment, it would activate and deactivate these firing points, or these AI points. And that was your primary tool to say, okay, the player moves over here. I want the AI to sort of be hiding behind these pillars. I want them to occupy a certain territory in the space. And the way you achieved that was primarily by just moving around these AI points. So you spent a lot more time. You'd spend hours on Condemned. You'd spend hours on building an encounter for, say, 3 enemies. Okay. But on Halo, it's a totally different sort of scale of encounter design. And you can't spend hours fighting 3 guys, scripting an encounter for 3 guys. You're talking about you spend an hour, scripting an encounter for 20 or 30 AI, right? The way this sort of worked was we relied heavily on the AI's kind of core behavior to handle most of the micro, I guess you could say, like the micro behaviors. When you're designing an encounter in Halo, you can generally fight the AI, and the AI systems are gonna handle most of the core behaviors. What we did when we scripted Halo encounters was we worried more about the sort of large scale macro movements of the squads. And you didn't really tell squads, well, you go here and you go there. What you did was you set up a set of rules and constraints, and you setting different parameter values that said, okay, based on the status of the current encounter, like the AI is allowed to occupy these different spaces, and then you'd set certain constraints up.
Halo 3 ODST made some adjustments on that formula. You now have sectors. Previously, the game only had bounding boxes for trigger volumes. What changed is now you can make irregular shapes rather than just having boxes. Why does this matter for AI? Well, areas can now be defined by sectors, and you can automatically populate these areas with firing points with just a button press. Yes, in the previous Halo games, the designers had to painstakingly place each firing point on the map. That's everywhere an AI can go, and it had to assign its area. I've come to appreciate the developers behind these games a lot more because it's just so much work to build a game. And these engines running on 20-plus-year-old hardware would have been excruciatingly slow. You know what? I can't believe they got an algorithm to do their work for them. I hate the idea of machines replacing artists, so they should place all of those firing points by hand. Art is meant to be painstaking sacrifice. Halo 3 ODST also added squad patrols to account for the open world. It basically gives the designers more control over how and when the different squads are, given objectives. And it kind of randomly selects objectives for them to do, so it feels more dynamic, like there's different things happening. And it's not all just pre-scripted. It makes navigation feel more natural. Also, the squads now have something called cells within them. Basically, you can now choose from a batch of characters, weapons, equipment, and then set probability for each to spawn on this character. This was added to help make Firefight work, but they used it in the campaign as well. It added a little bit of indeterminacy to the gameplay. You could also set the squad to spawn in a formation. Instead of having to place a bunch of spawn points, it basically spawns a bunch of AI within an area facing a direction.
At least in the latter Bungie games, everything was squad based. Those squads communicated with each other and operated as true squads, groups of AI, and that's something that I've leveraged in my AI systems that I'm building.
Also, you want to know how the AI knows how to jump? How do they not randomly jump into bottomless pits? How about climbing? Well, the designers place those. Well, the designers place where to do it. It's that simple. They're called hints, jump hints, etc. They have a location and a direction to jump in. Halo Reach builds off the innovations in the Halo ODST engine. In terms of AI, it had the Spartan AI constantly following you around, and some new enemy types. What new features came with Reach? Not a single huge one that changes it, but kind of a large amount of tiny little updates. They had a much higher level of attention to detail when it came to the AI in Reach. For one, they rewrote the tag editor. Instead of Gorilla, which all the previous engines used, it was a rewritten .NET application in C# called Bonobo. Although if you download the Halo Reach tools on Steam, you'll see it called Foundation. This is because of the Bonobo incident. At least this doesn't run like shit. The Scarabs got broken, I heard, because the IK system was rewritten. That's inverse kinematics, it's what makes the legs touch the ground. There are now queues and quick queues. These can be placed in an area to create a preference for specific behavior among NPCs, or inject a certain behavior. When these AI are in this area, they should be more likely to do this. Quick queues tended to be generic ones, while queues are the regular ones that you have more control over. For example, there is a queue where when you get to these bodies, it readies the NPC Spartans for combat. The queues have distinct stimuli. There are, for example, queues in the Long Night of Solace to increase the vision cone of all the enemies by a massive amount, or ones which reduce it on Nightfall.
The very early versions of, say, the Space Fighter, before we had the Saber, it was I took a Banshee and I used the tag editor Gorilla, or it was a Bonobo, one of the two, and I adjusted the parameters to just, I can't remember if I adjusted the gravity of the vehicle or what, but I sort of set something up that made it more like a space fighter, and then I asked Marcus for a space skybox, and then put some capital ships in there, and was able to get something that kind of felt like a X-Wing fighter or whatever.
There are also generic stimuli. Halo Reach had a lot of generic templates, squad templates, performance templates, which are basically animation templates, and these all made the designers' jobs much easier. They also overhauled the animation system because Halo Reach was a much more cinematic game, with the talking Spartans constantly emoting around you. They developed the Thespian system, where you can associate actors' voice lines and certain tasks, which have an associated animation. Basically, it's designed to be a more dynamic animation system. In previous Halos, you had activities, which were set by the designers through the objectives tree. In Reach, you had these thespians, which makes it easier to control when the characters are performing this specific action, like the sleeping grunts. The designers would simply place them in an area. This was because they're trying to be cinematic and more like Call of Duty and have a bunch of pre-planned behaviors, but it didn't really work that well, from what I've heard. Apparently the system kinda sucked to work with and was kinda clunky. But, it was the beginnings of really where gaming was going, and it showed kind of where gaming was going. The AI in Halo Reach were also more fearsome than the Halo 3 ones, but a lot of this is down to the artists and designers, but it was also a deliberate choice. The elites were back as enemies and they're more dangerous than ever. They move really quickly, their animations are quick and not extremely telegraphed like the Halo 3 brutes. They have higher health. They have more deadly ones as well. They have this one-hit kick melee. They were deliberately trying to go back to being more like Halo 1. They don't even speak English anymore. They have this weird alien language and they're actually kind of scary. They're trying to make them big and a bit terrifying. All this is to say, it's not all about the systems and the code. All the research has found that harder AI is perceived as smarter AI, which ultimately loops back around, reiterates the point I stated at the beginning. AI is storytelling, is far more art than it is technology. You'll notice how much of the language they borrow from cinema. Voice lines, cues, scripts, actors. The designers are script writers. They pace each encounter like a movie scene. Emergent gameplay is a bonus. It's added on top, and Halo frankly prioritized this emergent gameplay with the hard-coded AI a lot more than most games. But even Halo benefited a lot from its scripting. They honestly complemented each other really well. Unexpected behaviors which come out of the mechanics simply become another part of the characters the designers and artists have crafted. The job of the programmers is simply to make their life easier.
I think most modern games that try to achieve something like Halo, it's probably true. They probably get caught up in the Hollywood envy and they're trying to achieve these cinematic moments, and they think the best way to do that is to do more direct scripting. Halo's a sort of an epic, space opera basically. It's a game that could easily fall into the Hollywood envy bucket if it were to be remade. I think a lot of people look at Halo, maybe a lot of, let's say, business people or the people with the money look at something like Halo, and the first thing they see is, oh, it's like, it's like Star Wars. It's like a blockbuster Hollywood production, in video game form. And so I think it's easy, or I think there is a trap, a pitfall where Halo, one of the great things about Halo is it did have this solid AI sandbox. Time you play, you engage one squad and it knocks them into this task. Well, the second time you play it, you might engage a different squad first, and then that squad would move to that task. So the end result is that the encounter would play out different each time. But it wasn't like we were hard scripting what those outcomes were. We were just setting up a series of constraints, and then the AI squads were responding to those constraints.
Halo's AI was good because they got an idea of what was fun early on, and they iterated over that for 10 years. Iteration is understanding that the first time you do something it sucks, and then you keep banging your head against the wall over and over and over until you get something decent. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you can discover you have something really awesome, a golden egg. And when you find that, you want to make sure you treat the goose that laid it as good as possible. Massive thanks again to War Thunder for helping make the video possible. The special link to download for free is available in the description and pinned comment. It's available on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile. There's a bonus pack available for new and returning players that haven't played for at least 6 months for PC and consoles. If you use my link down below, it's got multiple premium vehicles and an exclusive vehicle decorator. It's available for a limited time. Subscribe and like the video. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.